Okay, welcome back to ASU's Department of Engineering. These are our case studies. We have a really great case study today. Today we're going to be going to Dubai. And you can see on the slide here that this is an 18 billion US dollar tri-city development, three very large cities that were going to be built around a wildlife sanctuary called Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary, which was a Ramsar site, so it's an internationally recognized wildlife sanctuary right at the end of Dubai Creek, which is the main water course that comes into the city. And this was an environmental and social impact assessment. The approval was needed in 6 months. It had started and been running for several years, and I was asked to come in the final 6 months and to get the project to the construction phase. We had over 250 international experts that worked on the team, and this was in about the year 2002. If you look on the left, you'll see the big picture with Dubai between Africa, Europe, and Asia. And you can see that this is where the birds come from into Dubai for refueling. So they'll fly up from Africa, they'll refuel in Dubai, and they'll head over to Asia, or they'll come down to Asia, refuel in Dubai, and head over to Europe. And so this was a major refueling spot. There really aren't very many places in the Middle East that have water and have a safe place like this for wildlife. And so you can kind of see why, from an environmental point of view, that would be very important. And also from an economic point of view, Dubai is known as the Hong Kong of the Middle East. Tremendous development is happening there. If you're not familiar with Dubai, there are lots of links here and you can come up to speed. We have a lot of Middle Eastern students at ASU. They're going to be very familiar with Dubai, and a lot of these links you don't have to worry about if you're familiar with Dubai. So let's just take a quick look here. Here are a couple quick links. First is a time-lapse construction of the Burj Khalifa, which is the largest building in the world. This is the building that Tom Cruise jumped off of in his what's the name of his movie? What was the movie with Tom Cruise? God, I forgot that. Well, Mission Impossible. So this is the movie that Tom Cruise jumped off of the building in Mission Impossible. And nice, very quick video that shows how they built the building. This project was in one of my three city developments. So this project was in and covered under the environmental and social impact assessment that we did in this project. There's also a nice construction for you construction engineers on how the palms were built. These are offshore islands that were built as well. So here's an artist's rendition of what the tallest building in the skyline looks like. This is kind of the reality, and this is what it kind of looks like now, today after it's been built. And you can see the extension of Dubai Creek in the right side of the photograph. This was all part of the design effort when I was there in 2002. You can see kind of a before and after picture here, before on the left and Dubai Creek on the right. You can kind of get a better sense of feel for the city. Whoops. A little too fast. This is the Burj Al Arab. This is the only 7-star hotel in the world. Looks like a sailing ship. You can see in the inside picture, I think it was Roger Federer and Andre Agassi played tennis up on top of the helicopter pad that was there. And there's a link here so you can learn more about this hotel. It's a very opulent, amazing hotel. Costs thousands of dollars for the cheapest room to stay there in a night. And here's some construction shots of that under construction. Another shot of Dubai Creek. And this is the hero of our case study. This is Sheikh Maktoum. He was very helpful to me on this project. He's an amazing leader, has an incredible philosophy on business and life, and we'll talk more about that. He's written a book, which I'll show you at the end. And I know the Middle Eastern students know quite a bit about him, and he's really an amazing person. Okay, so this is the 18 billion Tri-City expansion. It's a large, complex industrial ecology case study. The case study demonstrates how the principles of industrial ecology can be effectively applied to very large, complex projects. And while I was there for the environmental and social impact assessment, you really have to look at these projects from a lot of different points of view, not just environmental, not just social, but also economic, technology, policy, communications, and other dimensions. So this mega project was in trouble, mainly because they had different worldviews. You had environmentalists who felt there should be no development near the wildlife sanctuary, and you had developers who wanted economic development and wanted to build these beautiful cities in close to the wildlife sanctuary so that people could see the wildlife and could benefit from the wildlife sanctuary. And so finding a balance between those two worldviews is really what we had to do in this case study. So we have a number of introduction videos for those of you that want to learn more about it. Dubai, as I mentioned, is the Hong Kong of the Middle East with many of these mega projects, and here are some of them that are listed here. The ones that are well known are the World. Those are all islands that are in the shape of different countries in the world. Like you could buy England for, at one point it was like $8 million, and you could buy all of the island of England if you wanted to. There was rumors that Paul McCartney was going to buy England. I'm not sure if he did or not. Then you have the palms. They look like palm trees, but those are actually very large developments. Creates a lot more coastal areas and shoreline for shipping and development of Dubai was kind of the concept of the palms. This is an artist rendition of Dubai, and you can see that since I was there in 2002, a lot of this is filling out, and that you know, they're building to the reality of it. Now, Dubai has no water. That's one of the key constraints that you need to understand about Dubai. Has oil resources, and they have these large oil power plants, and they sit side by these desalination plants. They pull water out of the Arabian Gulf, and they take the salt out, and they pump the salt back out, and they dump it offshore. And this is all the water that you see in Dubai. This is where it comes from. And they've started to build solar desalination plants. They have one that was about 35% done in construction about a year and a half ago. So it's coming along, and they realize that the oil won't last forever. Their oil reserves are limited, and they're looking for renewable ways to continue this mega development in Dubai. Okay, so we had an environmental social impact assessment on this project. We needed the approval in 6 months. Dubai included the Dubai Creek extension, so they needed a second outlet to the Arabian Gulf. They have one big water course that comes in, and it kind of dead-ended at the wildlife sanctuary. And the original plan was to dredge a channel right through the wildlife sanctuary and then back out, turn and go back out to the Gulf. And this is what the environmentalists were up in arms about. It had 3 large city developments for $18 billion. You had the Dubai Healthcare Cities, which was run by an Egyptian company. You had the lagoons, which was under Iraqi management. It had a number of different investors. And then you had Business Bay, which included the world's tallest building, and that was a Dubai company. So you had 3 clients that I was working for with 3 very different corporate cultures, okay? And I'll talk more about that in a minute. The developments next to the Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary, so we had to figure out how to protect this wildlife sanctuary, which was very important to the world community and also to Dubai. Now, the environmental and social impact assessment project manager had just resigned. He was saying how the developers and the environmentalists were fighting, and the development was on track to destroy the sanctuary, and it would also destroy the Dubai Creek water quality. And so this is the first little tip I would give you on these kinds of projects. When you're brought into a project like this, it's always good to talk to the person who is in your position before you. Whatever job you take, if there's someone who is doing the job before you, you really want to talk to them, because you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about what worked, what didn't work, and what adjustments you can make. And so I called him. He was in England. He was very nice. He talked to me a long time, and I listened to him, and he kept telling me it was impossible, so I knew I couldn't keep doing what he was doing, and I would have to do some things that were different on this project if I was going to be successful. Okay? So this is another kind of sketch, and you can see how the water, the Dubai Creek comes in. It dead ends there at the biggest balloon on the picture there. That's kind of where the wildlife sanctuary is. And the idea was then to turn back to the right and come back out and have a second outlet to the sea so that you get flushing. It would help create more waterfront property in Dubai and add value for these developers. Okay? And this map here shows that area with the orange square around it in the top left. That shows the area that has to be dug out to the sea. And these are actual aerial photos that I found. The top one, that was the original photo where they were under construction. They were just starting to build this outlet to the sea. And then in the second photo, in November of 2016, they actually cut it open to the sea. This was a big issue here. We had to work a lot with the stakeholders. They're very wealthy people that lived in this area, as you can imagine, near the coast. A lot of those people had to move in order to, for the construction to move this new water course through there. And so that was a tough negotiation process that had to go on with those stakeholders. This is an artist's rendition of the new creek, the new Dubai Creek outlet to the Gulf. So you can kind of see there, and pretty much this is under construction. This was obviously after I was there, but I found these shots here when it was early construction days on the project. And you can see a lot of earth moving was required, and it was a major construction effort. We had to study the water quality in the creek, and we set up these buoys with these continuous water quality data monitoring systems. We had a very clever group from Holland, some Dutch guys that were there, and they did these physical models, and they also did these mathematical models to figure out how to design the channels so that you would maximize the flushing. We didn't have a lot of tidal influence there. We had about 1/2 a foot of tidal influence. So you had to use that as best you could and get the flushing to try to clean out the creek. Okay? One of the problems in the creek was we had a lot of wastewater that was discharged into the creek, and they had these armies of trucks that would collect the sewage every morning. And you can see in the bottom right there, they would line up for miles. I'm talking like 5 miles of these trucks in a line. Sometimes they would have to wait in line for 24 hours before they could discharge into the limited sewage treatment plant that they had there at the project. And a lot of times, raw sewage was being dumped into Dubai Creek at this time. And there's a link here that you can check out, and it shows somebody driving down this long line of trucks. They're kind of chatting while they drive down the long line of trucks about how crazy it is in Dubai, where the development just got away from them and they didn't have the sewage treatment plants. So this was a major effort while I was there. They have now built a major sewage treatment plant, I think maybe 2 plants now, and a lot of the truck traffic that was there is no longer there, but they still have trucks that move around a lot of sewage and take them directly into these plants, but they do have a lot of pipelines now that take the sewage in. Okay, so I'll quickly talk about the 3 city development projects. This gives you some background on the Dubai healthcare cities, okay, and this is a quick picture of it. The concept is that this healthcare, you can get any kind of healthcare you want. So anywhere in the Middle East, if you have any kind of a problem, whether it's cancer or you want acupuncture, or you want traditional, or you want conventional medicine treatment, you can get it here. And they have all kinds of different hospitals and clinics and doctors that work out of the healthcare cities. And it's been built now, and it's quite a successful project. The Lagoons was a high-end residential area, and they had all these channels that they were going to have in there to promote development. And this project has not been as successful. They had some problems. This was the project that was run by the Iraqi management, and they actually sold off most of the development. There's only a very small sliver, which I'll show you here on a map in a minute, that's actually still the lagoons. But that was the concept of the lagoons at that time. And this was the lagoons then under construction, you can see here. Then the Business Bay, and this is the one with the tallest building in the world. You can see this is it here under construction, and this is where they had to run Dubai Creek back out around this development and out to the sea. Okay. Okay, so the project management on this, at the start, there were 6 committees of decision makers with 3 different companies, okay? And that was one of the things that the project manager who was there before me told me, was that he was always in meetings, he always had to meet with all these people, and it just wasn't working. So I sat them down and I said, okay, we're going to streamline this to 1 committee, and I want 2 people from each company so that we can make quick decisions and we can meet our schedule. And of course I met tremendous resistance with this. I mean, we had a legal committee, we had a land committee, we had a budget committee. I mean, they had all these different, and I said, look, it's not going to work, and if you want me to stay as your project manager, we need 1 committee, and I'll take 2 people from each company, and you have to figure out how to deal with your company on the other side, but that committee is the committee I'm going to talk to, and that's the committee that's going to make decisions. And took a little while, but we got consensus on that, and that really helped. That helped to streamline. So when you come into these projects, you really need to look at how decisions are being made, and you need to really try to streamline that down and get the right people in the room who can really make decisions and move your project forward. Now, I mentioned they had very different corporate cultures. The Dubai company had very, very good relations with the government, and they understood Dubai, and I could see very quickly. So any meetings I had with the government, I took the Dubai, the two people from my committee or whoever they assigned, I took them to those meetings with the government, and that worked really well. The Iraqi group, they like to fight. They like to fight with everybody. They argued, and they were really disruptive. And so I kept them focused on the construction and working with the contractors, the construction people, working on the schedules, the budgets, working on those guys. And the construction guys are kind of hard-ass too, and so it worked out okay for those to work. And but I definitely kept the Iraqis away from the environmental groups. That was where a big problem was. I could just see just totally different viewpoints about what to do on this project. So I kept them completely away from the environmental groups, and I kept them away from the Dubai municipality, the government, the local government that was responsible for the SIA, because it was disruptive. It wasn't helpful. And then the Egyptians, very polite, very nice, and they were very, very helpful. So I took them to a lot of the meetings with the environmental groups, and that worked very effectively. So you have to look at your team that you have, and you have to try to figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are, and figure out how to get them focused on the things that they can add the most value and keep them out of areas that they're going to be disruptive. Now the contract in Dubai is sacred, okay? It must be followed. I found this out very quickly in listening to the project manager. There are all these contract issues, and they're always arguing about what's in the contract and what was done and what wasn't done. And one of the problems I walked into was that the project team was not getting paid, okay? And the companies were saying that we hadn't filed the right paperwork. The people that worked on my team were saying, yes, we did. So once we had gotten our strategic team with just a few people who can make decisions, we sat down and I said, look, we have to start paying our people. As a project manager, you have to go to fight for the people who work for you. The good people that are doing good work, they have to get paid. And so, we had a very difficult meeting, and at the end of the meeting, I explained to them, if the team doesn't get paid in 3 days, I'm shutting the project down. Of course, they were very upset. They didn't like that, and they thought that was ridiculous. And I said, look, they haven't been paid in months, and unless these people are getting paid, we're shutting this project down in 3 days. So we ended the meeting, and the second day, I sent them a note, reminded them there are only 2 days left. On the third day, I said there's only 1 day left. I called them, I explained to them, no one's getting paid, and I said if they don't get paid, I'm sending everybody home at the end of the day. And at the end of the third day, I sent everybody home, and I shut the project down. Well, you can imagine what hit the fan, and everybody was very upset, and we had this horrible meetings for the next day, but within 24 hours, everybody had gotten paid, okay? And we got the project back on track, and we got everybody to come back in, okay? And we got the project up and running, and it ran quite smoothly after that. We had a few bumps with a few of the contractors who didn't get paid after that, but for the most part, things went much smoother after that. Another thing about Dubai is that there was absolutely no corruption of government officials in Dubai. And this was kind of a new thing for me, having worked in the third world, and you've seen some of the other case studies that we talk about where corruption is a big problem. In Dubai, they actually pay the government officials better than they pay a lot of the company and private people. And the philosophy of Sheikh Maktoum and the government is that they want the best people they can get to work in the government, because that is how the government and companies will be successful. And where it's quite different. In the United States, especially right now, we seem to be on a course where we're sending a lot of career government officials away. We look at the government very suspiciously. There's a lack of trust. But in Dubai, it's very different. It's seen as a partnership, and it's very important that they work well together and they put their best people that they can find. A lot of these guys have masters and PhDs from all kinds of universities. They speak several different languages, and they're very bright people. And I could see no sign of corruption with government officials there. So that was very refreshing to see that. And then finally, I talked a little bit about how you prioritize stakeholders. And it's very involved, it's very complicated, but this is a very simple diagram. You need to think about how much power a stakeholder has and how much interest do they have. So environmental groups, the 3 companies that I work for, fall in that top right box up there, where if you have bird watchers from the wildlife sanctuary, they might fall down in the bottom box, in the bottom left box, because their level of interest is somewhat okay, but they don't have any power. You don't have to worry about it. Generally, environmental groups fall in that top right box because they can always go to the media, they can always make a lot of trouble, So you have to manage them very closely. And obviously your clients who are paying all the bills, you have to manage them closely as well. Okay, so then we come to the wildlife sanctuary, okay? And it's very close to all the construction of these 3 different cities that I talked about. And there's a link here that gives a nice summary of it. And the key species was the great flamingo. They had these incredible flamingos that were there. They're the biggest flamingos I've ever seen, and they're spectacular. And everybody talks about the flamingos there, but there are many, many, more than 150 species of wildlife, birds and wildlife that are there. So it's a very, very important wildlife sanctuary. And you can see here from these shots that the wildlife sanctuary sits right underneath the city itself and very close to the city. And they had built these blinds. People could walk out through these blinds in the top left there. They'd walk out through the blinds and they could view and observe the birds. And at the end of those walkouts, you could see these blinds, and they have telescopes and binoculars available, and the kids go out there, and it's a great way for them to learn about the wildlife that's in the wildlife sanctuary. So here, this gives you a little more background about the wildlife sanctuary. And so now let me get to the crux of this case study. So in this picture here, you can see right in the center is the wildlife sanctuary. And originally, the boundary of the wildlife sanctuary is the red line that goes around that wildlife sanctuary. And the developers wanted to develop right up to that red line, okay? And the environmentalists were having a hissy fit that it needed some kind of a buffer zone around it. And Ramsar sites generally have buffer zones around them. So there's a clear precedent that some kind of a buffer zone was probably needed in this site. And they were arguing back and forth because every foot that you take away from the developers is millions of dollars. You know, so there's a lot of money at stake on how big you make these buffer zones. And you can see why it would be, be controversial. The environmentalists, of course, are building these tall glass buildings close to the wildlife sanctuary, and they were concerned all these birds were going to fly into the building. The noise, especially during construction, would be disruptive to the birds, and they might not come back. And that was kind of the major concerns that they had. And of course, the water quality of the creek was deteriorating from the raw sewage that was being put in the creek. And there's a lot of trash that would float into the wildlife sanctuary from the developments up the creek. And so these were kind of the issues that we talked about. So we were going round and round. We weren't making a lot of progress. And then I noticed in the top left corner near the creek there was this large building, and it turned out it was a palace. And I said, well, what is this building that's here? And they informed me that it was Sheikh Maktoum's summer palace. And a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, well, in our contract, because since the contract is sacred in Dubai, we must have Sheikh Maktoum, we must consult with all our stakeholders. And he's an important stakeholder, so we must consult with Sheikh Maktoum. And why don't we invite him down here to our stakeholder meeting? And they all kind of laughed. They all laughed, and they thought, that's not going to happen, And I said, no, I'm really serious. We need to invite him to our stakeholder meeting. I said, if he doesn't have time to come here, we need to go to him, but we need to get input from him. He's clearly a stakeholder. He's right here on the edge of the creek. It's been his vision to open this channel back up to the sea, and we need to get him here. Now, this map is actually was a map that was an aerial photo that was taken in 2015. So at the time, we didn't have all this water course to the left that was going back out to the sea. And the idea was to actually dredge the wildlife sanctuary, dredge right through what's called Dubai Design City, and just dredge the channel right through the wildlife sanctuary, okay? And obviously that didn't happen, and it was a good thing that they didn't do that. But at the time, that was the plan. Okay, so the next day, I talked to the Dubai company, and I said, guys, you've got to get us in to see Sheikh Maktoum. And sure enough, the next day, a black limousine pulled up. We hopped in, the three of us hopped in, and we went over to the Summer Palace. And next thing I know, I'm drinking coffee on the veranda with Sheikh Maktoum. And we're looking out over the wildlife sanctuary. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you like about the wildlife sanctuary? And he says, oh, I love the flamingos. I just love the flamingos. And I said, oh, okay, well, what else? Let me tell you about my flamingos. And he went on and on about the flamingos. He had special pellets that were made in Switzerland that had growth hormones, had carotenoids in them to make them extra pink. make them extra large and tall, and that's why they're the biggest, pinkest flamingos anywhere in the world, probably. And so I explained to him, well, you know, Sheikh Maktoum, usually you have Artemia shrimp ponds. That's the main food source that these flamingos eat. And maybe we could build some of these Artemia shrimp ponds in the wildlife sanctuary so they could get a natural source of food, you know, and it'd be probably healthier and better for them in the long run if they got more of a natural food source than just feeding them pellets. And he looked at me and thought about that. And I said, you know, it'd be really good if we could put a berm across, a boom across the top end of the estuary, and we could keep trash and oil spills and things like that from going into the wildlife center. It would be a small cost, and a boom like that would help a lot. I said, we really don't want to dredge right through the center of the wildlife sanctuary. You're going to really disrupt the wildlife and disrupt the sanctuary. It'd be better if we could cut a channel out and around and leave the wildlife sanctuary alone. And he thought about that. And I said, you know, this area down in the bottom left corner, there were a lot of four-wheel drivers that were driving around. We could see them. They were driving around. And I said, you know, it'd be good if we could put some berms up or dig some channels and keep those vehicles out of the wildlife sanctuary. And he thought, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I said, you know, it might be good if we could build a visitor center, you know, a nice visitor center. I mean, you have these nice blinds that are there, but maybe a nice visitor center to teach people, teach the children, teach people, the visitors, about the wildlife. And we had a good wide-ranging talk about different things that we could do at the wildlife sanctuary. So I said to him, you know, it'd be really great if you could come down to our stakeholder meeting. We're going to have one tomorrow. We have one every day. And if you could come down tomorrow, it'd be really great, and talk to him. And my guys from Dubai got kind of nervous, you know, when I said it, but I just said it like that. And he looked at me and he says, you know, he says, just a minute. And he called over his executive assistant, and he said to them, you know, I would like to go to this stakeholder meeting with Mr. Bruce, and I would like to go tomorrow morning. How's my calendar look? And they said, oh, you have the prince from Saudi Arabia, you have this person and that person and all these important people. He said, no matter, cancel them. Cancel them all. I will go to the stakeholder meeting tomorrow. So we left the meeting and we drove back, and I told the two guys, I don't want you to tell anybody that he might show up tomorrow, because if he doesn't show up, you know, it's not going to be good. And if he shows up, the element of surprise might be helpful to have him come in. So the next morning we were at the meeting, and everybody was kind of arguing about the buffer zone. And next thing we know, Sheikh Maktoum with about 20 people, an entourage of people, walk in the door. And he was great. He said, oh, this is great, this is great, this is what I want to hear. I heard you as I was coming down the hall. I heard you discussing. I want to hear all about the wildlife sanctuary. I want to hear from all the stakeholders what's going on. And of course, the room went very quiet. Nobody would say anything at all. So I explained to him briefly about the buffer zone and the differences of opinions that people were having. And he says, okay, he says, well, would you like to hear from me? And everybody said, oh, yes, Sheikh Maktoum, we would love to hear from you. And he got up, and we had a map like this that was up on the wall, big, huge map that was up on the wall. And he walked up, and he made this fantastic presentation. He said, first of all, he says, the first thing we're going to do is we're not going to cut a channel through the middle of the wildlife sanctuary. We're going to cut a channel around the wildlife sanctuary. And he pointed up to this area that you can see on this picture that's here. And he drew a line. This is the way the water was going to go, and we're going to leave the wildlife sanctuary alone. Then he said that we absolutely need a boom across the top of the channel to keep trash and to keep oil spills out and keep boats from going in to Dubai into the wildlife sanctuary. So he pointed out that. He pointed out that we need a berm or we need a ditch on this side because of the four-wheel drives. He said he turned to the environmental groups and he says, we need a visitor center at this wildlife sanctuary. And he turned to the WWF people, the World Wildlife Fund people, and he says, will you help me build a wildlife visitor center? And of course they said, yes, Sheikh Maktoum, we'd love to do that. And later he told me he did that because he figured he's got to give them something to do to keep them busy so they're not complaining about everything. And then they would know how to build a visitor center and incorporate solar and all these good things that would teach people about you know, the future. And so, and then he got into the important issue about the buffer zone. And he outlined very specifically the buffer zone, which is pretty much this yellow line that you see in the center of the diagram there. There's a lighter yellow line that goes around that. And that's pretty much the area that he had, that he proposed at that time. A few minor things I noticed are slightly different, but you can see it cuts out a lot of the Dubai Healthcare City land there. It cut into the, they call it Dubai Creek Harbor in the pink there on the right now. Over to the right you'll see it says the lagoons. That was all the lagoons when I was there. So the lagoons had some financial problems, probably in the 2008 downturn, and it looks like they sold part of their development away. But a lot of the development also got eaten up by this buffer zone there as well. So anyway, at the end of his presentation, he asked if there were any questions, and nobody had any questions. And he says, "Great." He says, "Then, let's get back to work and let's get this project on track." And as he was walking out the door, he turned around and he says, "Oh, and remember, we have to have this approved environmental social impact assessment in, I think it was like 4 months or 3 months at that time." And he says, "Is there anyone here who can't meet that schedule?" And again, it was real quiet. And then he says, "Good, because if you can't, it's off with your heads. Ha ha ha." And he walked out the door. So it was wonderful, top-down management, clear direction on how to move the project forward, and we were able to move the project forward and make the schedule. Now, another issue that was there in Dubai at the time I was there is they had these terrible construction camps and overcrowding and no air conditioning. I went out to a number of these, and it was not good. And they made a lot of progress since 2002 on this issue, and I think we had something to do with that. I went and I asked a lot of these contractors why they don't provide safety equipment for the guys. There were a lot of falls at that time, fatalities from falling. I think there were more than 400 the year that I was there. And they said, well, it's just not in our contract. Again, the contract in Dubai is sacred, and they said if there was language in the contract that we have to provide safety equipment, that we have to provide better housing for people, we would do it. I mean, if everybody did it in Dubai, then it would be a good thing, but right now nobody does it, so we don't do it, kind of thing. And so here's some more pictures of it. Very hot conditions, 6 months out of the year. It's extremely hot there. I'm not even sure I could stay outside for more than 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm from Arizona, where it's really hot, but it really gets hot there, and I don't know how these construction guys can do it there. So, so what we did is, since the contract had to be followed, we prepared a series of white papers, okay, to be included in the contracts for our project. And we had one for the construction camps, we had one for safety, one for sewage treatment, we had one for minimum wage and on-time payment, because we weren't the only ones who had seen that problem. That's a major problem across Dubai, listening to people. We had one on energy efficiency, one on water. And we would put these white papers into the contracts to ensure that our project didn't go the way of a lot of these construction projects. And it wasn't lost on the city of Dubai, the municipality there. They saw what we were doing. They took those white papers, and over the course of I'd say 2 years, they passed local regulations that incorporated a lot of these white papers to improve the conditions of the workers there. And I've been online and I've looked, and I do think a lot of progress has been made. I think there's some contractors who are still kind of cutting corners in Dubai, but huge progress has been made on this issue, so that's a very positive thing. Then the project also was designed to allow for rising sea levels over time, okay, because that was a concern. And you had water courses, especially in the lagoons, and so we had to make sure that the project could withstand any sea level rises. And I talked about how we resolved the developers in the wildlife sanctuary. So, and here were the key elements that Sheikh Maktoum in his presentation made to everyone. And we actually built shrimp ponds with flamingos with natural food sources. The visitor center, I think, has now been built and WWF runs it. Looked at fences and trenches and things to secure the project. And all these elements were what made the project work. Okay, so we obtained our approval on schedule. We were given 8 signed sets of documents. Each, you had to have 1 set was needed at each of the 3 construction sites before construction could commence. And I put all the copies in the trunk of my car, and I drove back to the office, and I told them, well, we got all our documents. You guys can start construction. They were all happy. I said, but you've got to pay us first before I'll give you the documents, because we we were having more and more trouble again with getting paid. And of course they said, no, 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 and then the contract it says you have to give us the documents, then we give you the final 10%, you know. And I said, well, there's not been a good track record on the project of us getting paid, and so in order to get the 10%, in order to get the documents, you need to give us the 10% first. Well, we went round and round for about 24 hours, and they did pay us. We did get paid, and I took them down to the car. I got everybody in the car. I said, okay, let's go get the documents. I backed out of the parking spot. I pulled back into the parking spot, and I opened up the trunk, and there were all the documents. And they laughed, and they grabbed the documents, and they ran off to their construction sites. And the senior guy kind of hung back, and he looked at me, and he says, you know, Mr. Bruce, we like you. You're a funny guy. He says, you're tough, but we like you. And so you have to stick up for your people. You have to make sure you get paid. And sometimes you have to be creative in order to, and use the leverage that you have in order to make sure that people are paid. And that was one of the things I learned in Dubai. And then the lagoons, they had a major scope change after the ESIA. Unfortunately, you don't want that on these projects. You do not want major scope changes, because then you have to go back and get the approval again. And this delayed their project, and I think it's one of the reasons why they had economic challenges. But you want to work with your client and not have any kind of major scope changes after an approval is given by the government. You don't want to open it back up and have to go through it again. Okay, so this is the case study. It's the end of it. Large, complex, no clear solutions. Dr. Allenby calls them wicked. This is a wicked $18 billion problem. Covers lots of economic, technical, environmental, and others. There's a lot of technical engineering that was involved in this project. It was a really exciting multicultural dialogue, getting all these different groups to talk together. Fortunately, we didn't have any corruption that we had to deal with, so that was good. We had to follow international best practices. We followed the IFC performance standards, the Equator principles. And again, these projects, I think Sheikh Maktoum calls development a process. It's never over. It's adaptive management. You have to keep working development. It's never finalized, and that certainly is the case here. And I think it shows also the power of the Middle East economics. I'll conclude with this book by Sheikh Maktoum. He's an amazing person. He believes that speed wins. If you're the fastest, you'll win. Timing is very important, and when an opportunity comes, you've got to take that immediately. You have to embrace globalization. You don't really see that in the United States at this time, but he's embracing globalization. He's promoting free trade. He's promoting development, and he promotes people from all over the world to come to Dubai and do their business there. He believes in using high-quality information when you make decisions, and that's why he has very smart people in the government. And he wants the government to actually be smarter than the private sector. And that's very different than the United States seems to be going right now too. And this is what stamps out corruption. This is what keeps countries and cities on track, is having good government people in there to manage those issues. You have to adapt quickly to change. And he believes that the success is going to depend on the young generation. He puts a lot of effort and time into education and bringing the young generation and making sure that people who graduate from universities have good opportunities in the future. So I leave you with that, and we've got lots of different links for you to look at for the different things. It's an amazing place. You'll see really different modern versus traditional culture in Dubai. I encourage you, if you ever get an opportunity to go there. If you get an opportunity to work there, take it, because I do think it's a big part of the future. And that's the end of our case study. Thank you.